Alright, should be live and such. So I'm just going to start with a drawing video as a response to an email in a conversation with one of these people I have offered the money to, who haven't responded in any kind of, yes, okay, of course, we'll talk about it way. So they've made now the argument that is the cliche argument, which is braking distance. So I ask for evidence that takes 4 times the fuel to move anything twice as fast, and they won't produce that evidence, and they'll just say braking distance is somehow the same thing. So I have been over it and over it how, well, the problem with that is that it's not the same thing. That, even a not very smart person, as I've pointed out, could understand that if I put a scale in a road and then I rolled an object, I would find out that the object weighs a lot less on the scale the faster I make it go across the scale, indicating that there's clearly less impact with the scale, less weight being pushed down on the scale. And you could understand that if I really go fast enough, it won't weigh anything at all. And so friction is not pulling the same amount out. Now, this is an argument, okay? These are facts that Galileo established, okay? Really a long time ago. And it really just kind of has to do with this whole letting things fall down an inclined plane and recognizing that whatever happens on this side, the opposite happens on this side. So Galileo pointed out that these are units of time, okay? And that the units of time are 1 and then 1 unit of time, and what you end up with is a ratio of distance of the odd numbers. So 1, 3, 5, 7, as it falls in gravity and as it rolls down an inclined plane, the same truths are true. And which means if it's going up an incline, it'll be 3 to 1 this way. Okay, so half the speed will be achieved here at 3/4 the distance, because these are equal units of time that it takes to move the distance. So as it slows down, it loses a lot more energy in this last unit of time than per distance. So all of this, if this was 4 units, it'd only be 4 units of energy lost in all of this distance, and it would only be twice the energy, clearly, twice the velocity, twice the weight, and twice the time. That's what gravity does. So the simple argument is that I can make this incline, this, and I can make it this. I can make it a straight line. If I made a straight line, I get exactly the same result. That is, I roll a 2 mass. Well, I must just say a 1 mass at 1 velocity, and it only goes this far. And the 1 mass rolled at 2 velocity goes 4 times further. And it's not because it has 4 times the energy, okay? It's merely because this is the same friction. Jesus, always something to mess up my presentation. This is the same friction. This whole unit here is the same amount as this little unit here. And that this is where you go half the speed. So if it was going 50 miles an hour here, it's going 25 miles an hour here. And it's this last little bit, okay? Same time here, same time here. So it takes twice as long to go 4 times the distance, sort of indicating something. And again, it's rather a dramatic statement. I mean, you're really saying, gee, look at the huge difference. I double the velocity, it goes 4 times further. Well, it goes 4 times further because friction treats it completely differently. Because it's contacting the ground less, it's communicating less of its energy into the ground the faster it goes. And so actually this experiment here is the same as this experiment here. This one starts at 25, okay, ends at 0. Well, ends at 0 here. And this will do the same thing. So this piece of the experiment will be exactly the same. It'll duplicate what happens here because the speeds will be the same. The friction will be taxing, okay, it'll be expensive. And this whole section, they got essentially, per foot, they got off very lightly in terms of how much the sink, the grav, or the friction took away from them. And again, friction is not a counter force. I mean, that's not a very, it's not a very reasonable physics statement to be arguing that friction is a counter force. It's you giving away your momentum. You're losing your energy by moving other objects. Now, you're going to move them just sitting in gravity. I just put something in gravity sitting on the Earth. It's technically heating the Earth. It's adding pressure to the Earth. It's constantly putting some energy in. And the point is through that same mechanism, if I move this object and roll it, the object is going to give away more to friction now because of the fact that it's moving across the surface, and it will leak energy through the same holes, so to speak, the friction of weight has already produced. But the idea is ultimately you can understand that what you're evading by moving is the weight, okay, of gravity. Because the same gravity will hit you in this 3/4. If it was rain falling, that's the rational analogy. Gravity's like rain, mass is like a bucket. You're collecting the same amount of rain through this whole section as you collect here. And that's the best way to understand it. And so you have less weight here over this large surface. You're applying the same pressure to a large surface, same amount of paint, you could argue. If you were spraying the paint, you'd know the paint was incredibly thin here, and it's very heavy here. And that's the easy way to understand how this argument is fallacious. It's fictitious. It's not real. Okay, this 4 times the distance is not 4 times the energy, and it can be understood. It would have been understood by Galileo. Galileo could have just made the argument I just made. He would have said, wait a minute, it's really not energy, 4 times the energy, because it's getting off lightly. It's rolling for free. Okay, the faster it goes, the less friction, the less it's losing to friction, the less weight, the less pressure. Yes, per time it's the same, but per time it's only twice the time. Perfectly consistent with twice the velocity. Twice the velocity gets you 4 times the distance. That's the truth. Okay, but it's not 4 times the energy. So that's probably enough to that person. If they'll listen to that little piece, it's completely a debunkable argument. It isn't evidence of it taking 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. In more than 300 years, you've had a theory, and the fact is you can't produce any real evidence of you collecting this extra kinetic energy stuff ever. I mean, no example of it taking more fuel to go twice as fast. None. I mean, 4 times the fuel. Let me make it clear. No evidence of that. Twice the fuel? Yeah. 4 times the fuel? No. Not even close. And so you're defending a fable, and you ought to do it. You ought to take it seriously. So you ought to do your research. Go look up Leibniz. Go look up Galileo. Go look up even Newton, and why they believed what they believed. Okay, and then show where they were missing something. Descartes, Newton, and Galileo somehow were missing the big truth, okay, of the mysterious mv squared, the living force it was called. So just understand what you're defending, and what you're defending with kind of an insulting arrogance, pontificating about how you have evidence that you really don't have. You have no evidence that because something rolls 4 times further, it therefore has 4 times the energy. That if you found some reasonable way to collect the energy, that it would actually create what you say. That somehow with the twice as fast object, if I put a generator on it, that it would generate 4 times the energy. It won't generate 4 times the energy. It's just not a fact. Alright, so that's enough of that. So we'll see if there's any comments. If not, I'll just make it a short video. Something like that anyway. As I really don't know if there's anything else to go over, frankly. Guess I could find something else. So maybe I'll do that. I'll go see if there's any news from the peanut gallery, as it sometimes is called. The peanut brains. But probably not. Oh, there we go. We have a new link to something. Look at your stupid little ass in the basement while all the brainless, talentless, no idea meats have sex for fun and are in the process propagate their genetics. You promote that. No, I don't think I do, but anyway. I mean, you know, so 3 of those. He had to post the same crap comment 3 times. Oh, it says something. I've reported a family 2 times due to living conditions and child treatment. You're probably a perpetrator, no doubt. But anyway, these animals need to stop having sex for pleasure and stick to crack pipes. So I don't know exactly what's the problem here. There's no direct association between any idea that sex has to involve pregnancy. There's all kinds of ways to prevent that. So you're saying that you know best and that people shouldn't have sex to stop pregnancy. I'm saying that's kind of unrealistic and silly. So yeah, go ahead and sell your idea and see who buys it. See who doesn't have like a 3-foot-long beard who buys it. Oh, fuck. I mean, people are just so stupid. Hi, if you're going to do the lever oscillation experiment, I don't need to just oscillate a lever. I already did that one. That one's been there and done that. So why would I do that again? Because it's so obviously true. Okay, make sure you time the case without any masses first. Why? I would assume that as you change the masses, you'll change the oscillating rate. So why would I do it with different mass ratios? So we're talking about the weight on the lever. The weight is what's being, the lever sees weight. It doesn't see mass. So the obvious argument is if the weights are the same on both sides, the weights, then it will oscillate at the speed it would oscillate for those weights. Okay. And then compare it to the case with the masses. So why would I do that? Again, that would be stupid in my opinion. If the time difference is significantly large, there should be a difference around a factor of 1.5x. Well, says you. Then the masses are non-negligible. I don't know why I would worry about this, frankly. It's not anything like doing what you're saying. Okay, so you're not going to prove there's any kinetic energy involved. You're not going to prove you've broken momentum. The point is the kinetic energy theory overtly says any time you convert all the energy from a light object going fast to a heavy object going slow, you have to, frankly, if you conserve the momentum, you have to destroy kinetic energy. And if you do the other way around, heavy object converted into a light object, you have to create free kinetic energy because you have to conserve the momentum. So you're just not smart enough for this conversation, frankly. Otherwise, you run into the problem where the hanging masses might have too little mass compared to the lever. Well, that's really not a problem. I already pointed that out. It's a very light lever, but whatever. Fuck you. I don't need your advice. Thank you very much. Do you think it's possible for you to... Oh, friendly thing. Yeah, so why should I be friendly to this kind of crap? There's no need for me to be friendly. Sorry. No sale. That ain't going to happen. Not interested. Let's see if there's anything in the regular comments. I guess you could see these, and then that would be considerate of me to let you see them, I suppose. Why aren't they showing up? Interesting. Should be there, frankly. I don't know. Firefox is not showing for some reason. Alright, well, we'll see if we can connect that. Alright, see if we can fix that. Really should have been there without me having to fix it. So, Toady, good. Let's see. Whoops. What is the search? I don't want to do any of that crap, thank you. Here's my view for the record to those calling it out. Okay, I am always polite, and it's the best way to be when interacting with anyone. Yes, it isn't ideal, but frankly, I have learned with my advanced age, that the odds are you're talking to scum, and you might as well punch first. But anyway, I am critical, just not obstinate. I became interested to debunk Gary, but was surprised when I looked at the experiments. That's right, you have to just do a little tiny bit of research. So that's what I've requested from the very beginning. Do what I did. Look it up, and then try to find the experiments. You'll realize there aren't any, okay? And that there's really nothing validating this theory. And if you go all the way back to the originator of the theory, you'll find out that he made no arguments. He made an argument from God. God says so, is what he basically said. Okay, not much more. He made those simple things where he said, look, it's 4 times the distance, has to be 4 times the energy. So he made that argument and nothing else. So he didn't do any explicit experiments, and he didn't provide any evidence. And he was quickly defeated by the Newtonians, because the Newtonians pointed out very quickly that, guess what, your theory creates free energy, because anytime I conserve mv, quantity of motion, frankly, I'm making free energy by your theory. So how can it be true? It can't be true, because there is no free energy, there's no perpetual motion, so you're nuts. And frankly, they won the day, and Leibniz was buried a complete disreputable character. Okay, he was a pretty famous scientist, and nobody would even pay to bury him. I mean, that's how disliked he was by everybody. They didn't have enough friends to even bury him. He had the people who originally paid to make him into a scientist, so to speak, had him as a family scientist. The family had to bury him. All right, anyway. But yeah, you do the research, you find out this is made out of crap. Okay, so I'm open-minded. I've spoken to Gary, and I don't 100% agree, but I think it's worth looking into. Yeah, see, he's waiting for more evidence. I don't frankly need, the absence of evidence is all the evidence I need. Okay, in 300 years, you can't produce one experiment showing this kinetic energy doing actual work. I think that's pretty decisive evidence that it's made up. Okay. My drive is to stop talking and do things. Well, that's nice. I'm more of the talk than do, but whatever. Should be easy enough to close this out. Thank you. Yes, it should be. We'll see. However, what I find when I start looking is that it's not easy as it seems. That's right. The experiments are a little bit subtle, and you have to do the hard thing. The easy thing is to take energy away from something, to reduce something's velocity. The hard part is to do the conversion where you increase the velocity. That's the tricky one. I think Gary should do the experiments, but why do you think I should do them? Again, that just doesn't make any sense. I found out there's a flaw. Because I found out there's a flaw in their theory, I should do the experiments? That makes me an experimentalist all of a sudden? I don't think that's true. The fact is, I am mechanically inclined. But again, I think it's a waste of my resource, frankly, to sit there, building things. But anyway, go ahead. But I'm willing to help, hence doing the balls colliding. In my world, it's best to simplify always, and so I'm keen to try something to provide evidence either way. Yes. I think Gary is somewhat, what is that, irascible? It's his character. Well, whatever, fuck you too. Anyway, I personally wouldn't fight with people. I think you would if they started finding out who your family was and started, picking on them. I think you'd fight. I think you'd find that pretty fucking offensive, but whatever. I would ignore them. Yeah, I don't really think you would, but whatever. But I admire Gary as an iconoclast and someone who sticks to his guns. Really, I don't have no interest in gunning. I mean, from the very beginning, I made physics arguments. I still do, right? I mean, 97% of my video content is me explaining on this board a physics concept. Is it not? Or, arguing in defense of a physics concept. So, I mean, I'm really not just sitting here fighting with people. That's a delusion. That's an illusion created by their noise, not by my videos. Nobody could watch my videos and say, oh yeah, it's all just about the rants against the evildoers. No, that's a tiny percentage of the videos. Okay, I would ignore them. Blah, 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 blah. I think it would be interesting if we found proper evidence that he is wrong. Be interesting if we found proper evidence that they are right. That's the funny part, right? They've had over 300 years. I mean, since Galileo, since they're arguing basically with Galileo's discoveries and saying Galileo is wrong. So let's just understand, it's 400-year-old. And they, in 400 years, they haven't put together a list of the evidence, which they don't have. Okay, I like to think he would change his mind, but I am certain that the other side won't. Well, I'm certain that they can't reconcile the fact that they have two different formulas that are in direct contradiction with each other. They cannot possibly coexist. So if you prove there's kinetic energy, you might as well just forget about momentum even existing as a concept, because it doesn't mean anything. Again, you're in this ludicrous position. If you conserve the momentum, which all the physicists say is basically a law, you have to account for all the momentum. You have no choice in any circumstance where you're transferring energy from a light thing into a heavy thing to destroy energy, and to do the inverse every time you go from a heavy thing to a light thing, you must create free energy. Anyway, but still, either way, it would be nice to find out either side. Yes, it'd be nice to be able to resolve this once and for all. I think it's resolvable as just a logical equation. I mean, it's kind of logically obvious that what levers are doing is converting momentums. They're taking a fast deceleration and turning it into a slow deceleration turning into a fast acceleration, or vice versa. All right, I think we will get a good enough setup that we can show something. Just messing with the cradle showed me the experiment can be done. Yeah, the tricky one is, though, you really need to be able to do the one where you actually show the creation of the free energy. And you might not be able to do that with your setup, but you'll certainly be able to show plenty of irregularity. So my conclusion is that when we get a decent experiment, see, I mean, obviously if you believe the energy is transferred from one object to the other object, you can do the experiment that'll show it's not the right amount of energy being transferred. But if they say something like, well, no, the energy's reflecting, then they'll be able to weasel out. But anyway, so my conclusion is that when we get to a decent experiment, then we will publish the video and also make it very clear. And I don't think it'll make any difference, but we'll see, right? I'm sort of the opinion that people really don't want this truth. And they don't want it quite desperately. And that's why in all these years they haven't required it to be demonstrated to themselves. None of these people needed proof to believe. I mean, that's obvious, right? So none of them needed to see it. None of them said, show me it taking 4 times the energy, go twice as fast. No one said, show me the 8-pound ball knocking down twice as many pins. Nobody said it. I mean, why wouldn't that be their natural instinct once you point out to them this kind of weird notion of squaring velocities? What an implication of it is. Let's see. I would be happy to even put up a prize to have someone perform the experiment properly. Well, the big joke of that is that's what they did back in the 1700s. Is, France put up a prize for somebody to rationally explain what energy is. And guess what nutty theory won? Yeah. All right. And get results to duplicate the test. We will also package it nicely so it's easy to find without a lot of other attacks. Well, frankly, I have plenty of videos that don't have any attacks in them, but whatever. Argumentative speech, etc. That, I think, help people understand this. You're making a bold accusation that 400 years of physics was fucktarded. Okay, that they didn't understand even simple Galilean principles. And they did it all while they're rubbing poo into Newton's face, okay, and saying Newton was a moron. I mean, they have a lot to account for. So if they are actually proven to be wrong, what is the implication of that fact? Is that they've done insanely shitty physics for 400 years. I mean, insanely shitty. I mean, fable physics. It's not even close. I mean, this wasn't a hard argument for them to win honestly, and they couldn't do it. You know, it's a very basic thing, energy. So they got the most basic thing. I mean, what else is there, right? There's matter and then there's energy. I mean, you can't get more fundamental an idea in physics. And they, you know, butt fucked it. All right. I mean, they molested the facts to believe what they believe. All right. I wanted to put it up as someone has asked. I wanted to put this up as someone has asked. Yeah, see, you're responding. So they make a simple accusation. Toady is a dupe. Toady is a sycophant. Toady is false for anything. Toady's a moron. Blah, 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 blah. And you're responding. You're defending yourself. Right? Yes, that's the impulse. Somebody lies about you, you attempt to defend yourself. I mean, that's the sad, tragic truth of the internet. Some liar just makes an aspersion, and you can't just leave it out there. You have to respond and say, fuck that, that's not the truth. So here you are, and you've only gotten a tiny bit of it, frankly. It hasn't even begun. You know, once you become an advocate, okay, then you're really going to get the shitstorm. All right, anyway, someone has asked, has dealt with a lot of flat earthers. Again, I found them a good proving ground for my approach. Yeah, because they're weak. They're not part of a mob, so they don't come after you. They're not this mob that thinks it's okay to get into all your personal, like I said, they'll get into your personal life. They might even call your employer. They'll go to any lengths to try to shut you up. And they've shown this over and over again, that this is the tactic of the mob. Okay. My overall view are that I know that this will have an absolute truth. Well, we both know there's a fact. One of them is right and one of them has to be wrong. I mean, the incompatibility of the two theories is just, that should be obvious to everyone who can do a little bit of theoretical thinking. That it really can't be possible that both of them are real concepts, because they really do give very different answers to a simple question. All right, the universe will act consistently one way or the other. We just need to put in some work to find out. They're the ones with the Jesus theory, okay? They're the ones making the bizarre claims. I mean, why should we have to prove it doesn't take 4 times more fuel to go twice as fast? Shouldn't they have had to prove that in the first place? I also like Gary because I've not seen him attack anyone who didn't attack him first. Thank you. Don't fret. We will get there eventually. It just takes time. I'm drilling the larger balls this weekend. Yes, that's great. It'll be quite interesting. Even to make a good pendulum is a nice thing to just have. So it's good that you're making your own, because some of the manufactured ones are kind of chintzy. And they don't work great. All right. I don't know what this comment I couldn't make much out of, but I'll play it. What the hell was this stupid link? Oh, that's the Merker guy. I guess, he's not really in the right ball game. Anyway, concerning mindless marbles falling object, he has made it more complicated than it needs to be. Yeah, obviously. I mean, I say that the weights, you can't tell the difference between 9 pounds and 9 pounds. So if I make 9 pounds on a lever out of any mass, put it at a different location, I can't tell the difference between 9 pounds and 9 pounds. Or 9 pounds and 9 pounds or 9 pounds. 9 pounds always weighs 9 pounds. It doesn't weigh 10 pounds. It doesn't weigh 8 pounds. It just weighs 9 pounds. So, yeah, he proved that's not true by spinning a frickin' lever with a pulley on it. I don't think so. Let's say the object reaches a speed of 20 meters per second when it hits the ground. So that's we don't even care about the object hitting the ground. beyond the fact that it obviously falls at different rates depending on how much mass it has to move. Alright, if it is launched upwards with initial velocity of 20 meters, see, this is where text just so fails. There's no way you can really do this stuff, you know, trying to describe an physical experiment in a couple of sentences. If it is launched upward with an initial velocity of 20 meters per second, it will reach the same height in the same amount of time before stopping. I don't even know what that could possibly mean. I mean, obviously, the same time as what? If it's going twice the velocity, it will take twice the time for it to be stopped by gravity. If it's falling, it'll take twice the time. Can't take twice the time. It's going to fall at the same rate. It can't fall faster. So it can't be going 20 and something else going 10. So I don't even know I can't even make sense out of that. Anyway, if it is launched upward with the same momentum that is gained from gravity on the way down, it will lose that momentum to gravity on the way up and will reach exactly the same height. Yeah, everybody knows that stuff. In the same amount of time as it took to fall from that height. Yes, exactly. That's Galileo's ramps. Down ramp, just the inverse of the up ramp. Same thing. Same 1 to 3 relationship. You know. I mean, you can always just break it down to a 1 to 3 thing. You can just use because you can just use any unit of times. You don't have to use a full second for a unit of time. You could use a half second, or you could use a quarter second. And you could just take any amount of time it takes for something to roll, and you could just always do the 1, 3. 1, 3. It doesn't matter how long it is, how big it is, how much. It doesn't matter, because it's a unit thing. It's a unit of time. 1 unit of time, 1 unit of time. So it doesn't matter what the unit is, and so you can always break down anything's voyage into the 1-3 thing. That'll always work. Alright, so that was tolerably interesting enough. I don't know what this was. I don't remember. But it wasn't... Yeah, I don't know why it doesn't load. That's right, it was some sort of thing that wouldn't load unless I copied the link and then loaded the link, which was really weird. Yeah, it was a short too, which is really irritating. I think it was a laser light thing. Okay, that's what it was. It was laser beams being separated by lenses, and there's nothing new there, nothing to see there. I mean, you already know that where the light crosses is a single point, and so obviously you can't put a lens because the light is crossing. It hasn't got any width or height. It doesn't have any dimension at that crossover point. So there's no way to magnify it or expand it at that point. So that's not big news. They make all that stink about the Argo spot, and they think that's a big deal, when the obvious thing about that spot is that all the light from the entire circumference has to go into that infinitely small location. So that's why you can see the spot, is because the light isn't spread out over a large area. So all the photons are coming from the same spot, and that's why you can see it. But you can't see it when all of the photons are spread over a larger surface. Then you can't see the photons because there's too few of them close enough to each other. The further away photons get, the less likely it is you can register them as photons in your brain. Your brain can only register photons, that are commensurate, connected, spatially in the same dimensions. Whatever the right way to say that is. Alright, so we'll go to the live thing and see how we're doing here. Only 8 viewers. Okay, there's a couple of little cruddy comments. Let's see, somebody saying good morning again, but no, it's okay. I'm just really not a good morning kind of person. But anyway, it's okay if you aren't sure, but is there a formula you use for collisions to predict the transfer of momentum? I think the safest thing to do is just recognize that all you can transfer is the velocities. And so you really, for each substance, you have to first figure out whether it's elastic, hard elastic, or whether it's going to store some of the energy. So it's soft elastic. So the difference is soft elastic is storage, hard elastic, no storage. And then it's just a matter of saying how hard is the substance, the hard substance, and how quickly can the energy reflect. That is, how much pressure can you apply before the pressure gets back pressure. Before, see, you can poke me, and some parts of my flesh you can poke deeply, and some parts you can only poke very shallowly. So some reflect, create back pressure quickly. Some, are much more pushable. You can go much further in. I'm sure on some of you people, you can go a few feet. So I'm just saying that, to say there's a formula for something that is so dependent on the actual composition of the substances that are transferring the energy, I think would be pretty unrealistic. So I don't think you could compose a standard formula that worked for anything in a general sense, except making the distinction between storage and non-storage. Non-storage is going to be quicker reflections, so it's going to be a rejection. And storage is going to mean that you're going to have a rejection with added energy, because the spring will compress and then re-expand and add velocity to the thing you gave velocity to. All right. It will give a higher percentage of the velocity to the object, because the spring allows for the speed difference. It can do the acceleration and deceleration transfer. It can take the fast acceleration and convert it into a slow acceleration. Let's see. Can you make a formula if you assume no storage? Well, I'm just saying it gets kind of easier if you're doing the difference between... See, what are you going to say, right? Gold is really soft. Steel is very hard. Iron steel is not as hard. I mean, you're just stuck with the fact that I don't think you can say, yeah, you can make it if you want to say, if you want to put everything on a hardness scale. So you have to have you have to create a factor, like they do in the spring constant. You have to create a spring constant, where you recognize that, depending on how your spring is manufactured, it's got a different constant number. So you'd have to have some sort of constant related to what the substance is made out of. And again, you're talking about surface areas hit and all that kind of stuff. You have to make sure when the two things hit, they're not trapping air, because that's storage essentially, right? The air pressure, the compressed air, ends up being a kind of storage. So that's why if you hit something flat against something flat, you'll get a different outcome than if you hit things that are round, that aren't compressing any air. Just saying it's a little more complicated than simply saying what's the formula for the transfer of energy between uneven masses. I don't think there's a consistent formula for that. Now, they've tried to make one. I mean, Lewin does the Frankenstein experiment of combining the momentum formula with the 1/2 mv squared formula and creating the third formula, but that's the one that makes the wacky predictions that you can create free energy, because you don't have to conserve the momentum. That momentum is a vector, and kinetic energy is a scalar. Even though it's obvious they're both vector, there's no vector kinetic energy, right? When a train's rolling down the track, you don't say, I don't know which way the train's going. It's a scalar. I can't see which direction its energy is in because it's a scalar. Of course you know which way its energy is going. I mean, it's just so stupid that they try to get away with that lame crap. Alright, so we'll go see if there's anything. See if the Brozo has made a new video. The one he's promising, his redo of the simple experiment. And, he's going to try to destroy conservation of momentum. He's going to prove there's no conservation of momentum. That's his new ambition for his existence, is to prove that that's just a pile of crap. That theory. I don't need to conserve no momentum. Alright. Let's see. See if anybody else. This Par guy made a new video, but it's just so bad. So, I mean, it's coincidental. Oh, he took it down already. No, maybe not. Let's see. Videos. Yeah, he took it down already. So he made a stupid video doing exactly what I just described in the beginning of this video, where he's just pushing a thing with friction. See, if you put a log in the front of on the road, and now you smash the car into a log and see how far you can push the log, what you're doing is the same thing as just creating a hill. You're just creating a mechanism that allows gravity to take away the energy. So that's all the friction is. Friction is being created by gravity, and you're sitting there basically just measuring how much friction the gravity is creating. So, you know, it's certainly not deeply intelligent of these people to keep arguing that friction is a constant, even, linear force, because it isn't. It's completely dependent on how fast you're going or how much you weigh. If you weigh more, you're going to have more friction. If you're going faster, you're going to have less friction. I mean, those are the real facts, and they have assumed that it doesn't matter how heavy you are, and it doesn't matter how fast you're going. And that's really dumb, frankly. Really, really dumb. Alright, we'll see if any of these other Yahooies have anything new to say, or put up as a video, or annoy me with. How come that keeps opening the wrong one? I don't know. Never mind. Let's see the Iron Gosling guy, see if he's made a new video. Not friction, but inertia. No, so it's the same old crap video. Okay. Yeah, I thought this one came before that one. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Alright, so nothing. Alright, so we'll just deal with some comments and then get out of here, I guess. So if people have something to say, they can say it. And then I'll go home, so to speak. Yeah, screw you guys. I'll go home. Alright, pop-up chat. I don't know why they always default to the top chat. You hit live chat, and it never stays as a default. It's just annoying. Ugh. It should work better than this, frankly. Look, it works. I shouldn't complain that it, you know, in a way, it's a marvel of that Google lets anything work at all. But anyway. So, let's see if there's anything new there. Nope. Alright, so 2-minute warning. Somebody doesn't inject some sort of added value of some kind, some point, some question, something, then I will leave this video as it stands. I guess I could read my reply to the email. Yeah, it can't hurt. Alright, so once again, I appreciate the response. Unfortunately, it was just hyperbole. Galileo could have proved the assumption wrong, and anyone could show your statistics don't match your pontifications regarding how the world works. So he gave me links to 2 Wikipedia pages on, you know, accident reconstruction kind of data. And one of them actually has statistics, right? And the statistics show a 3-to-1 relationship, not a 4-to-1 relationship. So even that's funny. So right in his own comment, he's saying it's 4-to-1. He's insisting this is a well-established fact. Then he links to statistics and actually posts them in the email to show me. And it's basically saying, you know, the 10-mile-an-hour thing, you know, stops in 12 meters. And the 20 miles, the 20-mile-an-hour thing stops in 12 meters, and the 40-mile-an-hour thing, the thing going twice as fast, stops in 32. I mean, that's really not 4-to-1. You know, so it's just kind of funny that their statistics don't even back up their math, and they still argue as if it's a perfect match, when that's not a perfect match. So anyway, I say 36 is not 4 times 12. Okay, besides that, there is no evidence friction is a constant or consistent absorber of energy. Fast things lose less to friction than slow things. Look up Galileo's 3:157 ratio regarding how gravitational friction is applied to a rolling object. Cars going faster lose less energy to friction per foot. If you would actually think about it, it is perfectly intuitive to understand if I moved a car fast enough, it would barely touch, impose weight on the ground, and barely lose any momentum to friction. The kinetic energy theory, MVM, oops, I wrote it wrong. Yeah, I have to fix that. Good thing I didn't send it yet. Is over 300 years old, and this is the best evidence you can produce in its defense? Question mark. Good science should produce real evidence when challenged, not just arrogance and ungrounded and exaggerated storytelling. I will devote the beginning of today's video to this subject and explain why your rhetoric is really very unscientific. So I think it's all perfectly reasonable. I'm trying to be as fair as possible. He should be able to respond. I'm offering him $4,000 here, right? I'm offering him whatever he says, right? So I basically said to him earlier, just tell me the price. I'll raise the money. Okay? How high do I have to go? And instead of answering me, he keeps doing this, where he just, first he says, what's my evidence? Then I point out, I'm going to pay you to produce your evidence. I want you to prove it. Okay, that's what I'm paying you to do, is prove your theory. You're claiming a theory, now prove it. I'm paying you to prove it. Okay, what's the big deal? You should be able to do that real easy. It's a 300-year-old theory. Why can't you? You should be able to prove it without even trying hard. And this is what he provides as proof, right? This pretty freaking stupid understanding of how friction works. I mean, it really is stupid for somebody to think that friction treats fast things the same as it treats slow things. It's just not very smart to think so, if you really analyze it. And the real giveaway is the fact that the faster thing doesn't lose half its velocity until it's 3/4 of the way through its voyage. It goes 3/4 of the distance before it's going half the speed. Huge giveaway. Alright, so that's a little bit of a freebie for you. So we'll see. I mean, this is, I feel like, I've been disappointed so many times that I just can't get into this too much. But I mean, the very fact that he is staying engaged and attempting to provide a rational argument to me is some sign of life. But it is kind of, it's so cliche-ly bad argument. I asked to see it taking 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast, and he shows me it taking 4 times the distance to stop. Those aren't the same thing. So anyway, what did I have? I have the wrong window here. That's the one I want, yeah. Alright, 2-minute warning again, I guess. I really shouldn't have to do all the talking. There we go. We have a new one here. Lavander. You're against mindless breeding. What are you talking about? I mean, what the fuck is this horse shit? I don't give a fuck about his breeding habits. Yet you have no problem with people having frivolous sex for fun. Yeah, I don't have any problem with smart people being able to figure out how to stop pregnancy. Yeah, smart people don't have kids by accident. They take care of it, whether it's by being careful or cleaning up the mess after it's made. It's what abortions are for, retard. You know what the result of sex is, right? I don't really understand. Promotion of irresponsible sex. You're really insane. Sorry to point it out, but you're crazy. You need to take a little nap or something and see if you can get re-grounded here somewhere. Do you not see the issue there? No, I don't see any issue in this at all. It's just plain silly of you to say, I want people to stop having sex. I mean, it's just silly. And the fact is, there's plenty of technological advancement that makes it perfectly possible. So if somebody does go to the actual trouble to have a vasectomy, do you think they're now not entitled to have reckless sex, whatever the fuck that would be? I mean, clearly, there's all kinds of diseases, there's all kinds of things. Associating with people can make you sick, okay? Even just hanging out with women can probably make you retarded to some extent, okay? So I can do I can point out all kinds of reasons to live a celibate, distant life from all other humanity. I would do it if I could. If I could go to a desert island and be absolutely alone and just live with a cat or something, I would do it. In spite of the fact that, yes, it has some downsides. People are just a pain in the ass. Okay? Frankly, even very nice people are still just trouble. So how am I responsible for any of this crap, asshole? Alright, so anyway, I'm just going to time out you, and then the next time you show up, I'm going to block you. Okay? Because this isn't the fucking subject, cunt. God damn. Let's see. Put user in timeout. Yeah, we'll do that. Oh, too bad you got timed out. I should really get back to work, but your stream is more interesting. Yeah, well, don't get fired and such. So anyway, yes, I am. I think my videos are interesting. I watch them. Just a fact. And I find a lot of other people's videos, excessively wordy and not very interesting, and the subjects all suck, and yeah, so. But I'm sure that's just a matter of subjective taste for me personally. It's just, I just personally like me more than other people. Just the way it is, unfortunately. I'm just a more interesting zoo animal. Just turns out that way. So, let's see how we doing here time-wise. Almost an hour, so I guess we'll play for an hour and then we'll go home. I mean, go, get to doing all the little crap that needs to be done to maintain one's existence. We'll probably be planting beet seeds today. So that's not the subject either. Yeah, I just really can't. I wish people could have the conversation, right? I mean, I talk about this stupid friction thing all the time. And nobody says anything about the subject of friction, and how friction is really a sink. Friction is a soul sucker. It's like I gotta come up with a movie metaphor to some character in a movie, but it's a sucker. Friction takes your energy. It's not a counter force. It's not some Dracula that's gonna. Well, I mean, that's probably a good metaphor, right? It's taking your blood. It's not taking magical blood. It's taking your blood. Friction is a parasite. It's consuming you, kind of thing. It's not some thing that's doing something else. It's not throwing rocks in your way and then you trip over the rocks. It's all directly sucking your energy. And you can understand that the sink works different depending, like I said, the weight thing is so obvious. If you weigh more, you can understand you're obviously putting more pressure into the earth. You obviously have more contact with the thing. If you're being pushed into it hard, okay, you're going to dent it. That's all you have to kind of think about it as. You're just denting the electrons. You're pushing into the electron pressure of the earth. If you're heavy, the gravitational rain you're collecting is making you heavy. That heaviness is pushing into the electrons of the Earth, creating deeper and more substantial contact with the Earth, and now the Earth can just absorb whatever motion you have. It'll take the energy going down and it'll take the energy going sideways. It doesn't care which one, it'll take both. But the less you weigh, it gets harder and harder for it to take this component, right? The less I weigh, you could just even think of a round thing sinking into like mud. You know, the deeper I go into the mud, the more this way is getting pushed against. And the higher I am in the mud, the less this way is getting interrupted. I seriously gotta go. Have a decent day. Likewise, stay out of big nasty trouble. Don't run into any unnecessary vampires or friction monsters. Don't fall down. Yeah, that's the simple one for it, right? Don't fall down. Make contact with the Earth because it'll suck your, vital fluids. But that's, to me, it's a fascinating subject in a sense. Understanding, trying to come up with a perfect metaphor for this idea of making contact and what it's going to cause. But I mean, just the idea of the round thing sinking into the ground and just understanding that, yes, when you move forward and you're in, that means you're pushing this way against the substance. And it's going to slow you down. But the higher you are on the water, the higher your boat is. Yeah, it's like a boat analogy is perfect, right? They put a bunch of water in the boat, which slows it down, makes it less buoyant, because they're trying to minimize how much it's moved by waves. So they're trying to keep it calmer, okay, on the surface, less jittery. But yeah, it's expensive, to move the extra water, the extra weight through the water. And the higher it is on the waves, the more it's rocked by them, okay? But the less its velocity is impaired, so the higher the efficiency. You get through the water a lot quicker because you're giving away less of your velocity to the water. I mean, it's really that simple. You can understand that the same rules apply to rigid friction. Less wet circumstances. Yeah, less wet circumstances. Like asphalt. Anyway, it's a lot less wet. I already read that. Okay, so nobody's showing up to fill the gap. 10 viewers. Yeah, it's just not enough. We have to get to like 20, 30. 30 is maybe the perfect number because then you get a perfect number of comments and it works out quite well, I think. But you don't have that circumstance. It's either too little or too much. That's the internet. Too little popularity, too much popularity. You gotta have something in between. Yeah, with time. We'll see if it gets better. Again, I should just find generic questions people ask, and then I can just answer the generic question. I should just go to somebody else's video, and I'll just answer their questions on their videos. If I can find a reasonable question. That's the tricky part, though. People are really disappointingly dim. Oh, wrong battery. Alright. Gotta resolder that battery. The smoking thing is kind of the vaping thing because it's really, this stuff doesn't taste great. It's blah blah blah, and then you take a drink and it undoes all the nicotine you already consumed. It just makes you say, "I need more nicotine." It's just vicious circle. See, now I'm ready for more. Start all over again. Anyway, one of my psychological problems I've got to get over. But, I've had 60 years to get over it. I haven't done it 50 years. Nicotine addiction. Really is. It's 52 years of nicotine addiction. 52 years. Scary how long I've been here. It's like more than one lifetime. Seems that way, right? Seems so far away, the old days. So far. Seems like I was born before Galileo, It's like, yeah, I was here like 400 years ago. Yeah. I was a kid 400 years ago. It sort of feels that way. It was so long ago. But anyway, now I'm seriously close to being dead. Eek. Anyway, give you another 60 seconds. See if somebody could type something. There we go. Tim comes to the rescue. Is the following a true statement? In a collision, if the object being hit is moving away, so it's going slower than you are, and then you hit it, I guess that's what you're saying, its velocity will not be increased as much compared to an object being hit that was still. Well, obviously, all you can do is give it what you have. So if you're going 40 and it's already going 30, you're just going to give it 10. Because you can't give it more than the 40. The 40 is your limit. You can't give anything more than 40 because that's all you got as currency is $40 bills, so to speak. You can't give it a $50 bill. So all it can do is convert the 40 into a 30 or a 20 or a 10. It can't convert up. All right? It can only break the 40 into smaller denominations. It can't make the 40 into a bigger one. So that's the catch. That's why the Newton's cradle fails, is because it can't do the conversions. And the whole point I'm arguing is the lever can. The lever can take the $20 bills on one side and convert them into $40 bills on the other side, or vice versa. So it's about acceleration rates and deceleration rates. But yes, you can only give 10 miles an hour of your velocity to something going 30 miles if you're going 40. So that's it. It only absorbs a smaller portion of your momentum. The impact absorbs a small portion of your momentum. You give it to the other object. You lose a little bit of momentum. If it's standing still, you lose 4 times the momentum. Because you have to take it all the way from 0 to 40 instead of 30 to 40. A regular physicist could have answered that question probably correctly, because you wouldn't have to worry about kinetic energy much. I mean, you really do, though, frankly. If you try to do it as a kinetic energy argument, the fact is that it makes a mess because your fuel actually is more potent in a way, so whatever's moving you somehow has more power. And so, in a sense, you're giving an object more than just 10 miles per hour because you're giving it the extra little bit of kinetic energy that extra velocity will imply. And so somehow you gave it more than the momentum you sacrificed. So that would be the irony, right? Is that you only sacrificed 10 in momentum, but somehow you gave away 15 in kinetic energy. And that's the part their physics will never resolve because it doesn't make any sense. The two theories obviously are not compatible. That was the thing they did, the compatibilism thing. People always are, they use that for the free will argument now, but that's what they were doing. If you read the history, in the 1800s, they started writing about the controversy, and they basically said, oh, it was just semantics. That's what they actually said. They said the argument was a semantics argument. There's no semantics. It's not that the words are broken. The concepts are different. Okay, so they were arguing as if momentum and kinetic energy were perfectly compatible and they're not in any way divergent opinions. And it was just like, what the fuck? How can they get away with saying that? I mean, it was a real argument. I mean, Newton attacked Leibniz for it, and Leibniz attacked Newtonians, and it was a real argument. It wasn't just some fake argument. It was a real argument about a real idea of how the universe worked. And, you know, it's just crazy to say, oh, it's all semantics. They were just talking, you know. The words don't matter because the concepts are the same. The concepts are not the same. So even the fact that the historical perspective was so bad by the 1800s, physics was so stupid that it couldn't even acknowledge a real dispute. It's kind of like somebody saying a physical force model of gravity is the same as bent space or something. I mean, it's just such a cheat. It's just semantics. No, real energy, real accountable energy is a different theory than a theory that has no accountable energy. Those aren't the same theories. And such. So it's kind of funny, it's gotten a little warmer outside, but it's colder down here because the heat isn't on as often. So it's like, you know, it was warmer down here in the winter than it is here in the spring, which is sort of irritating. And it's surprising how just a little bit of, 4 degrees makes a difference. The difference between 66 and 70, it's really a giant difference in terms of how it feels. You can almost wear shorts in the 70 and, you got to wear this, in the 66. But part of that is, too, I go for runs in the morning now, and always makes you a bit, after you cool down, you kind of cool down too much. So that's a negative. But whatever. It's a minor problem. Oh, I had to clean up a dead cat today. That would suck. On my running path, the road I go down to get to where I run, cat got run over. Nice little black and white cat, blah, blah, blah. So I cleaned that up. Just so depressing. The only good news, it was a headshot, so he went quickly. I need to look at your Walter Lewin video. Well, there's a whole bunch of them, but anyway. But do they really say that people sitting on opposite sides of a football stadium will say this player has plus KE while the other person has negative KE? I don't know how to fit that with your analogy, but the point is he did a free momentum experiment, okay, merely because he calls momentum a vector. And frankly, this just making up vector and scalar words that have no meaning. They just assigned it. There was no evidence that said kinetic energy isn't a vector. It's clearly a vector. Anytime somebody points to something and says that has kinetic energy, they can always tell you which way the kinetic energy is going. It's just as vectory as momentum, okay? It's made out of mass and velocity in a direction. How could it not be exactly the same stuff? Again, I could just say, do they really think a 5-ton train has kinetic energy in some other direction than the direction it's going down the track? I mean, it's so ridiculous. But yeah, so I don't think Lewin does relativity arguments much, okay? He doesn't deal with relativity. So that almost sounds like a relativity argument. Somehow where you're sitting in the stadium changes what energy something has. And that's not really the argument. You're sort of doing the 3-dimensional space kind of physics, not the 4th dimensional space kind of physics. Lewin is staying in the real ballpark for most of it. But the idea of the rocket engine is the point is that if if you're going 10 miles an hour, then you're adding 20 to 30. Well, because you're squaring the velocity, the 20 to 30 means you actually have made more energy by going that extra 10 miles an hour. And so the more and more you increase that, especially in rocket engines, it means the octane, the power of your fuel, gets bigger and bigger and bigger, because every increase in velocity, every increase of 10 miles an hour means that at 500 miles an hour, that square becomes huge, right? You're squaring bigger and bigger numbers. And so where from the ground, the first 10 miles, you only got this much distance, per gallon of gas, you're getting insane amounts of distance per gallon of gas. By the time you use your last gallon, you'll have a huge difference in the octane value of the fuel. And what sense does that make? The gas gets more powerful the faster you're going. Come on. Too silly. But yes, I really don't understand your sitting on opposite sides of the stadium. How would you not know which way players are running? So I guess I just don't get it. The very fact that you could have something go into the experiment with 100 momentums, and let's just ignore what comes back out the other side. The very fact that you think something can come out with 133, that's free energy, because you have 133 in the same direction. And then you could just put the 133 into the same experiment, do it again, and now you have, 166. Well, actually more than that, it's like 74. And then the next time you'll have 257, and then, you just keep increasing your momentum. I think you said Lewin talked about an object bouncing off from a collision conserves KE because the bounced object now has KE. No, I don't recall saying anything like that. He did things where he bounced things off and they bounced back. And he was sort of making the argument that somehow it wasn't because it was an elastic collision, but of course it was a ping pong ball. He was bouncing into a billiard ball. Obviously the ping pong ball compresses so it can bounce back at a higher velocity because of that spring effect. Yes, springs can change how much energy you can put from one object to another. So you can do spring experiments that will allow you to convert more energy, move more energy from one object to the other, because it can take some of the energy and change the acceleration and deceleration, do the conversion. So you'll add another 10% to the total energy you gave back to the ping pong ball because of the spring effect. But without the spring effect, it wouldn't have bounced back as far, that kind of thing. But that's sort of a different, that's kind of a narrow one, what you're arguing. So I can't, without knowing the specific video and the context of what I was talking about, I can't really say. So I'm sorry if I gave them a misimpression. But yeah, I can't think of any. They're very careful not to talk about kinetic energy when they're doing experiments where kinetic energy makes a huge mess out of the experiment. So when they drop a ball on top of a ball on top of a ball and they drop it, they always talk about momentum. They don't talk about kinetic energy because the numbers won't add up. Because there's lots of little subtle conversions. You can understand the basketball compresses, the other ball would compress, and the tennis ball on top, or the golf ball. They're all compressible sources, and that means they're all storing energy, and they're going to give some percentage of it back in both directions. And so it's, it makes following the momentum a little tricky because you have to follow the fact that you've done a conversion of some percentage of the total energy has been converted by being stored in the spring and then released. I think there was the experiment where he's bouncing a tennis ball off a brick wall, and the mathematics says one thing, but I think practical reality says another thing. How fast does the ball come back? And the fact is that tennis balls aren't as good as you think they are. I mean, I've heard it's only 25%. You lose 25% of the energy from a tennis ball. It doesn't bounce back really perfectly to the same height. It loses 25% of its height, which is probably something like 10% of its energy. It's the velocity argument, blah blah blah, gravity, blah blah, 3 to 1, blah blah blah. So it's not going 25% less speed. It's going 10% less speed, which will end up looking like 25% less distance. So, but these are all complicated questions, right? So the real question is when you have a building that is immovable, perfectly immovable, it cannot absorb any of the energy in terms of any vibration or movement. Then all the energy has to go in one direction. You could logically argue it doesn't really have a choice for 25%, for 50% of the energy to stay in the building. Can't really do it. But as soon as that building moves even a tiny bit, you can understand that, yes, it'll give 50% to the building and 50% to the ball. So any yielding really dulls the reflection of the tennis ball. So you can really understand that hitting a piece of wood, that can move a little bit with the tennis ball is going to be different than hitting the tennis ball off a hard cement surface. The hard cement surface is going to reflect the ball much better than the movable object. So that's another experiment I haven't seen yet, and I'd like to see it, is that subtle difference between completely unmovable, so an object comes in with a spring and bounces back, and then an object that just weighs a lot, but it will yield, so it can be moved. Because that's where I'd say you could have as much as a 50% difference in the outcome with that little tiny difference. When a person rubs their hands together, they warm up. I am curious, what is that heat one feels, and how does that fit into your simulation with the protons and electrons? Well, you're feeling heat because you have sensors that detect heat, so there's deliberate neurons that are doing it. But let's just talk about the absolute real heat and not what you actually sense, because that can be kind of silly. And unrelated to reality. But I mean, obviously, that's what are you rubbing when you rub your hands, right? You're basically ripping atoms to pieces in a sense, right? The electrons are really pushing on each other. They're negative on the outside of atoms. The atoms are repelling each other pretty dramatically, and you're actually physically moving the atoms. That's what the heat is. So the heat is the fact that you push one atom into another atom, it pushes into another, and there is no friction inside the atomic world. So the little universe doesn't even know what friction is, okay? Because it is friction. See, it's doing friction, so it doesn't have any friction because it's actually doing friction. So any movement just keeps moving inside the object. So you can understand as you're pushing atoms, each one of those atoms never stops. The energy never stops. So each one is a new movement. Each time you hit one of the atoms, it's a new movement, It's all caught inside of the object, and so that's what the heat is. But the real, much more interesting subject is heat is just motion in all directions. So heat is when you disperse the energy into all kinds of directions, and if you made all the heat go in one direction, that would be motion. So it's like motion is really heat in just one direction. So if you can push on something and force the energy to stay in the direction you pushed, okay, that's motion. But if it goes in different directions, then it's turned into heat. So heat is really a kind of motion. It's just motion that doesn't have, it's the scalar kind of argument. It's motion in many directions that cancel each other out as a direction, so it gets vibrated. So heat is vibration. Okay, it's movement, but it undoes itself constantly, so it doesn't go anywhere. Where heat in a direction, all the heat goes in the same direction, so the object moves in the direction the heat's going. It's such an interesting, I think a better way to understand heat is to understand that it's just motion in too many directions. Is heat the little energy bits? No, it's the consequence of the bits. The bits are the pressure between the electrons. So you're compressing the ping pong ball. You know, the paddles move together, the ball bounces more times, it's hitting more surfaces. When it hits a surface, that's energy. And so it's moving stuff by creating higher pressure, which means more impacts. So the higher the pressure, the more impacts. The more compressed the matter, the more impacts. And the impacts are the transfer from the force to the matter. And it's, you know, it doesn't last forever, but I'm just saying it constantly moves from object to object. You can't kill the force. So until the ping pong ball finds a place where there's less pressure, it's stuck in the high pressure and it just keeps hitting objects. But if you expand it again, then there's less temperature, because now the forces are hitting less electrons. So they're giving momentum to fewer electrons per second. The force does all the moving. The matter just goes where the force pushes it. But clearly, you could argue that infrared radiation is a symptom of the high pressure, and that the photons being expelled are the result of the surface vibrating. So energy hits the surface. The vibration adds momentum to the surface, so it increases the frequency and makes it into visible light. So that's why as you vibrate something and heat it, at first it doesn't look any different. And then all of a sudden it starts looking different in the sense it starts glowing. It starts because it's vibrating fast enough to add energy to essentially the gravity, right? Gravity's putting pressure on, but gravity's not putting it on at a high frequency. And the surface starts vibrating, it starts giving the gravity a higher frequency, and when it gets high enough, you see it. You see the photons. So it's just the electrons pushing out into the world. When the electron pushes out into the world, it compresses the force. It reduces the wavelength, makes it a smaller and smaller wavelength. So as it pushes, it reduces the wavelength of the force and turns non-visible photons into visible photons, or turns radio waves into microwaves, or turns microwaves into visible light. Can you say more about why infrared radiation seems related to heat? Well, it's related just because it's the common vibrating frequency. So because we're mostly vibrating in this range of whatever 0 to 100 degrees, all these things, that's the frequency, okay, that creates infrared radiation. And if you go to some hotter surface, then you'll end up creating X-rays. So that's how they create X-rays, is they take another kind of metal and vibrate it at a higher frequency, a temperature, and it produces X-rays. Or they shoot ultraviolet light or some other kind of light into the metal, and the metal naturally resonates at a higher frequency and ends up creating the X-rays. But yes, it just has to do with how hot you can make something. And how much the atoms, the electrons, can vibrate. So there's a limit, because every chemical will have a different vibrating frequency. So that's why microwaves work on water, is because they can vibrate at the right wavelength. Okay, the microwave has the right, it hits, it bounces, and then hits again at just the right time. So it's like a kid on a swing. It keeps putting energy into the water molecule, because the water molecule can only vibrate within this certain amount of distance. So it keeps accelerating the speed of the vibration of the water molecule. So that gets into chemistry. It's a little bit deep. But every chemical has its own vibrating frequency, and that's why every chemical creates the spectrum of light. It's because pieces of it are going to vibrate are going to move. The electrons, each electron is of the chemical is going to be moving at different pressure rates, and those different pressures are going to equal a different frequency of light. But obviously, I would argue that hot objects are radiating lots of energy. Some of it you see, some of it you don't. You know, but it's producing radio waves and microwaves and all these other kind of things also. It just happens to be in, you know, which atom is vibrating, which electron is moving. And all the bumping of the atoms related to heat motion is all communicated by photons. Well, the essence of photons. It's produced by energy quanta, as Einstein called them. You know, so the energy quanta is what makes a photon. And it's the energy quanta that are being compressed in space. That is, you're taking energy quanta that's, you know, 10 of them are filling this much space, and you're taking that space and reducing it. So now 10 of them are in this smaller space. That's how you create a photon. Higher frequencies are more compressed force, and lower frequencies are less compressed force. But it really has to do with the, you know, timing thing, because when you hit the surface, you have to hit the surface in a way that's going to make it capable of you moving an electron. So you can't hit the electron just once and give it enough energy to knock it out of an atom. You have to hit it more than once. And so to ionize the atom, you have to hit the electron, and then that electron moves, and that moves other electrons, and then you hit another one of the electrons that was moved, and now you increase the speed, and then you do it a third time. So you could argue that a photon is made out of 3 components, and those 3 components have to hit like water waves. You know, the first water wave, the first compression, you compress the surface, the pressure moves out radially. Then you have to hit again somewhere on that ring and push that electron again to increase its velocity. And that creates another ring around that electron, and then you have to hit that ring a third time. And then you'll give the electron enough energy to pop out of the atom and create the ion. It's probably something, I have done videos on it, so maybe I'll do another video on that theory. It's not, this isn't, you know, what I just said isn't 100%, you know, I'm saying it's definitely the truth. I'm just saying it works. I think, you know, there aren't any experiments that provide an indication that that's not how photons work. All the evidence kind of says that photons do hit a big hunk of surface, thousands of atoms across. A photon doesn't hit a single electron and make the single electron ionize. The photon does have to hit more than one atom to make a photon, because the photon, frankly, in space is pretty big. Its polarization, if its polarization is proportional to its wavelength, you could understand. We could even understand, like, say I had a frequency of just dot, 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 right in line with each other, and they were going to hit one electron. You could understand that in the amount of time from the first hit to the next hit, the electron probably moved somewhere. Because, you know, everything's moving really fast. So how could you hit the same electron with that stream, right? Because the target moved. So what's the odds that you could hit the same electron? I mean, that's a pretty, you know, it's pretty much impossible to say that's how it works. So it's really just hitting some piece, you know, some electron that has been affected by the first impact, because the energy just keeps going. It's like the first impact gives the electron, say, 10 miles an hour. It gives its neighboring electrons 1 mile an hour, or 2, let's say. So it spreads its energy to the other electrons, and they move out at a much slower speed, but it's still faster than nothing. Then you hit it again with 10 miles an hour. You get it? So now you're up to 12 miles an hour. And then if you do that a third time, you're up to 15 miles an hour. And 15 miles an hour is fast enough to make the electron leave the atom. That's the argument. Yeah, there's just force bits, quanta of force, and matter bits, electrons and protons. And I'd argue those elements are all you need. So the force is moving the speed of light. It pushes matter, and that's all there is. There's nothing else going on. The matter just goes where the force bits push it. And you just have a few rules about how the force bits reflect or are absorbed by the matter, and that's it. You never kill the force. You never make new matter. It's, you know. So the force is constantly on the move, and all you're doing is changing what pieces of matter are being pushed by it. What pieces of matter have a differential? That is, they have more stuff hitting them from this direction than that direction, so they move in that direction. More pieces stuck to them, you could argue. They've had a previous encounter with force, and they haven't gotten over it until a counter force shows up to force them to get over it. You could argue. Alright, I'm probably about done. Yeah, 1:30. So I got a schedule I've got to keep. So anyway, thank you. The last couple of questions are good ones. Big, giant subjects. And so, very thought-provoking. Good job. And such. So, thanks to the participants. And maybe it'll get done in the next month. We'll have some real good, hard, decisive evidence, or I will be able to convince one of the show physicists to actually touch the subject. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. So till the next time, and such.